Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about, and I've mentioned this previously, but I just want to sort of cover the extent to which ordinary citizens in the West are being turned into political, ideological commissars whose job is to undermine and destroy the West and the Western way of life, Western values, Western history, destroy everything about the West and replace it with some sort of globalist equity dystopia. It's probably the best way to describe it. Now, we need to understand sort of the various levels that's happening. It's obviously happening at government, it's obviously happening in media and our institutions, universities and so on, but it's happening all across the private sector. Even mid-sized organisations are getting in on the act. And if you just to go and look at any business-related website, whether it's just sort of press releases, if you like, from businesses or just announcements and so on. There was a time not long ago when those business sites, news sites and information sites would be full of announcements from organisations about releasing new products or new technologies or success stories and how the technology has been adopted in this or that situation, which it resulted in greater productivity and better returns to shareholders, all that sort of stuff. It was just all that. You wouldn't see much else, which is fitting. It's a business website, for goodness sakes. That's all changed now. Just looking at just looking at one a couple of hours ago, or a few hours ago, the top story is about how Indigenous Black people are being oppressed and how they need more rights, and how white people have to give way and accept their wickedness and evilness, and so that society gets divided. There's guilt tripping and the entire guilt industry and race and gender conflict and pushes all that. So that's the top story. Now, a bit like how Elon Musk has shown or has been instrumental in uncovering how certain people are supposed to have hundreds of millions of followings or that sort of stuff, but in fact they've got less than half what's said. And the reverse would also be the case of people that don't have much of a following, have in fact more people following them online than you'd think. So when a story comes out saying that black lesbians should be promoted to CEOs, that gets top story within half a second of being posted. Clearly that's not the case. So you've got artificial boosting of stories that cause race and gender and social conflict and social division. So really that's the area where the globalists are most active ideologically, is to create race and social division and gender division. This is their main aim. This is how they go about weakening the very strong, very confident, or once very strong, confident Western societies. They have to attack it with everything they've got, and this is a good way. Accuse someone of something they haven't done, and just look at the shock on their face, and you've already got them. That's all. You've already got the advantage over them, and that's what the globalists are doing to us here in the West. They're accusing us all of being Nazis and Hitler and so on. And they do it non-stop, every day, every hour of every day. It's just a non-stop barrage of name calling and threats and accusations, and it's all across. Now just look at equity officers and inclusion and diversity officers, all these sorts of things. These are all political commissars. They produce nothing, they create nothing, they deliver nothing. All they're there to do is to create the social division and to crush white society. That's only. Now, I guess it's interesting to see, and I mentioned this before, I don't think this has ever happened in human history, where a particular section of society, women, have been so successfully co-opted into actively working for the destruction of their own society and their own nation, their own wealth, destroying their own fathers and brothers and cousins and nephews, actively involved in this because somehow it's good and it'll somehow be better. How will it be better? They don't know. It just will be. They've been told that at school. Whatever's going on currently is pure evil, racist, Nazi, fascist, Hitler. So anything you do that's different to that must be a good. It must be good. What else could it be? And anything you do to stop those evil people, because they're all Nazis, that also must be good. So you're doing two good things, and it can't be bad. But they're not really thinking very far ahead here. But hey, so they're looking at things like global warming and saying, well, the world's all going to end. I mean, for 10 years, the whole world will be gone. So anything we do to stop those evil white Hitlers, those fascist Nazis, must be good, given that situation. Now, you have to have a number of things. You have to have people who are easily sucked in and easily governed by, petty childlike emotions. And in that sense, they focused on the female population of the West and done a very good job of it. You look at all the people saying we welcome illegals, illegal aliens. They're all young women. I mean, you look at the people working for the NGOs. They're 90% women. Following up over the master manipulators behind the curtain, and the rest of them are gay and lesbian and this black. They've managed to gather the disaffected and convince them that they're being terribly oppressed, and that any change made to the current situation is an improvement to what presently exists. Now, they've gone along with it. Now, the Soviet Union, Pol Pot in Cambodia, all of Eastern Europe, political commissars who were there to brutally enforce conformity of thought, let alone behaviour, but definitely conformity of thought. They were protecting the ideology. And this is what globalization is. It's an ideology. There's no practical sort of aspects to it that make it better than anything that's gone before, what's here presently. It's simply an ideology that will serve the purposes of a very small elite, who will still go around in their jets, and because they're immune from these ideological requirements, same as they were in the Soviet Union. Western movies were deemed as propaganda, and people weren't allowed to see it. Whereas the Soviet elite would often have Western movie nights where they'd gather at the dacha of the country house of some communist heavy, and they would watch John Wayne movies and westerns and all sorts of things back in the day. So they're not subject to the laws that they will impose on others, and we saw this in the COVID lockdown. We're all masking and locking down whilst the elites were having wild parties, and any organisation that was pro globalization, such as Black Lives Matter and Antifa, because they're contributing to the destruction of Western society, they're allowed to do what they want. It's just responsible, sensible, pillar of society white people that have to be crushed. Everyone else can do what the fuck they want. It's just those damn evil fascist Nazis. So looking at the commissar side of things, we see it across all business now. Look how many, even smallish organisations have equity and inclusion officers. Look how many high schools and libraries, places like that, have drag queen, very sexualized dancing and so on that go on in schools and so on. It's something that's being pushed and forced, aided and abetted, very generously funded at all levels, to create and undermine or create division in society and to undermine the relationships we have, which hitherto have made the West very strong. You look at any sort of area of the world, certainly from the 1700s onwards, and you would find that unusually, Western nations were very not racially homogenous per se. I mean, they were that in many instances, but they were for the most part. They wouldn't turn against their neighbour, or they wouldn't aid and abet a foreign power to infiltrate and undermine and control. Now, there were some exceptions. Some of the patchwork of smaller petty dukedoms and states in Central Europe were the last holdouts. But after, certainly after the mid to late 1800s, it was very homogenous indeed, and also people shared the same values, believed in the same things, and it wasn't perfect, but compared to the rest of the world that was just in a permanent state of tribal chaos, the West was very together, and this was one of the big reasons, not the only one, but certainly one of the big reasons why the West pulled ahead financially and technically and so on so quickly. Ahead of all the other all the other parts of the world. So now that very together, togetherness, that sense of, you call it nationalism, call it what you like, that's being attacked viciously by the globalists. And this is all part of their thing, and the drag queens and all that is just another little way of chipping at it, using Disney to do to push LGBT propaganda. I was talking to listening to a video from someone who's attempting to justify why they push the LGBT so hard, and their argument effectively was that if even there's one, if you've got 100 million people, there's even one LGBT person, then it is the job of all that other 100 million people to change their behaviour, 100% change their behaviour, in order to be fair and equitable with the one LGBT person. And this is the sort of thing. Well, even if there isn't an LGBT person, there might be, there could be. What if there was? So everyone has to change their behaviour as a consequence. Now, this is how all they need is to get one person inside any organisation or business, and they can guilt trip and shame and so on, accuse everyone of being a Nazi. Say, well, you all have to change your behaviour. Behaviour that's organically created over centuries, because it's bad, it's evil, it's wicked, it's Hitler, it's Nazi. You have to change it for equity and inclusion. So the very idea of equity and inclusion is in itself a way of undermining Western society. It's something that the globalists use. Now, there's a lot of talk about people don't have the courage or the to fight back against this, and there is that. But when the globalists control so many institutions, any teacher that pushes back and says, well, I don't think it's appropriate, we've got drag queens, gyrating around in high-cut leotards and that sort of thing. I don't think that's appropriate for children at school. Couldn't we make it optional, say after school, or what about that sort of thing? Why do we have to force it on the kids? That person's going to get a job. They'll be accused of being a homophobe. They'll be accused of being a Nazi. They'll be Hitler. They'll be their promotions will be gone if they haven't got fired. They'll be treated like they'll be shunned by the other activist staff in the the union will come after them and accuse them of this, that. And, there'll be all sorts of things will be done to them. Is it really worth it? Now, if at a school of, for example, 100 teachers, 50 of them got up and said, hey, that's enough of that, then that will be different. But if one lone teacher or even two gets up, they can be crushed by the mass. And that's how the globalists are able to intimidate people into going along with this insanity. But we've got to do something about these commissars, these political commissars. They're in HR departments, they're in diversity and inclusion departments, all across the public service and the institutions, the schools, the government, all over the place. And even at some jobs, if you're a white male, particularly if you're over the age of probably mid to late 40s, you effectively got to go through an ideological sort of screening. You prove that you're not a Nazi, you damn fascist old straight white man. I mean, this is how bad it is now. And really, we need to push back against this. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.